There's a version of you from a few years ago, or maybe it's right now, who is working very hard to deserve someone's attention. Not in an obvious way, not in a way you'd admit out loud, but in the quiet, constant way of someone who has started editing themselves before they even open their mouth, running the mental check. Is this the right thing to say? Will this land well? Is this the version of me they want today? And the strangest part, you don't experience that as shrinking. You experience it as growth. You think, I'm becoming more self-aware, more considered. I'm learning from someone exceptional. I'm rising to meet something real. That story, the one where losing yourself feels like finding yourself, is the story I want to pull apart today. Because the most dangerous thing a charismatic person ever does to you isn't dramatic. There's no obvious moment where you can point and say there, that's when it happened. It happens across hundreds of small moments, all of which felt, individually, completely fine. And then one day, someone who knew you before asks, "Are you okay?" And there's a pause, a long, confused pause. Because you actually don't know. That pause is what this video is about. Stay with me. Here is the thing almost nobody says about charisma. It isn't really about the charismatic person. It's about what they activate in you. When someone is genuinely, powerfully charismatic, your nervous system responds before your intellect does. Warmth spreads through your chest. The background hum of social anxiety. The low-level performance most of us maintain just to get through a day drops. You feel, in their presence, like you can stop managing yourself so carefully. Psychologists describe this through something called social resonance, the sense that someone is genuinely attuned to you. Not just hearing your words, but tracking your pauses, your unfinished thoughts, the thing you almost said. And here is where it gets important. Your brain cannot, in real time, tell the difference between someone who is genuinely attuned to you and someone who has learned to appear that way. Not a moral failing, literally a neurological limitation. The alarm system you trust, the gut check, the intuition, the thing that usually tells you when something's off, it doesn't fire. It fires the opposite. Because the signals a skilled, charismatic person sends are the same. The brain codes them as safe, seen, and home. This is not the same as being charmed or flattered. That's surface level, and most people can feel the falseness in it. What we're talking about is something deeper, the sensation of being known. And that sensation, when it hits, especially if you've been lonely, or overlooked, or carrying around a version of yourself that never quite gets seen, that sensation is close to overwhelming. Here's what's actually happening in your brain when this occurs. Dopamine and oxytocin flood simultaneously. You're getting the neurochemical cocktail of social reward and attachment bonding at the same time. That's a powerful combination. It's the same combination that makes early romantic love feel transcendent. It bypasses rational evaluation almost entirely. And a highly charismatic person, whether they know it or not, triggers that response. What comes after is what matters. I want to talk about a specific person. I'll call her Nadia. Nadia is 29, smart, and successful by every external measure. She spent 3 years in a close mentorship with a man at her company, a man known for his magnetism, his vision, and the way he made people feel chosen just by being in the same room. In the beginning, she told me, it felt like finally being taken seriously. He would call her out in meetings, not to criticize, but to elevate. This is what I'm talking about. This is the kind of thinking we need. She'd go home lit up. She started dressing differently, thinking differently, and reading what he read. What she didn't notice, not until year 2, was that the elevation came with terms. The days she challenged his decisions, the warmth disappeared. Not dramatically. He didn't punish her. He just dimmed, became slightly less available. The light moved somewhere else in the room. And she would spend the next several days doing a quiet audit of herself. Was I too direct? Did I misread the moment? Am I being difficult? She was never difficult, but she kept asking. This cycle, warmth extended, warmth withdrawn, person scrambles to recover it, has a name, intermittent reinforcement. It's the same mechanism that makes gambling neurologically addictive. The reward doesn't come every time. It comes unpredictably. And that unpredictability doesn't make the reward less powerful. It makes it more, because your brain, now uncertain, locks onto the pattern. It can't think about anything else. It keeps pulling the lever. Consistent kindness, ironically, doesn't do this. If someone is reliably warm to you, you relax into it. You can take it for granted. You don't think about it obsessively. But intermittent warmth from someone you admire? That keeps you in a low-grade state of vigilance. Always monitoring. Always trying to recalibrate. Always half convinced the coldness is something you caused, because that at least gives you the illusion of control. If you caused it, you can fix it. Nadia wasn't weak. She has 2 degrees and runs a team of 12 people. The mechanism that trapped her isn't about intelligence. It's about what human beings are wired to do when social belonging feels uncertain. We try harder, every time. Here's the part I want you to really sit with. Identity capture. When your sense of self becomes so fused with another person's perception of you that you can't clearly see where they end and you begin. Doesn't feel like loss. Not while it's happening. It feels like becoming. And that's what makes it so disorienting to look back on. The memories aren't all bad. Many are genuinely good. You were expanded. You were challenged. You saw yourself through someone's eyes, and what you saw looked better than your usual reflection. The process moves in 4 stages, and almost no one recognizes any of them in the moment. Stage 1. Borrowed vocabulary. You start using their phrases and frameworks. The way they describe situations becomes the way you describe them. This seems like nothing. Of course, people absorb language from people they admire, but language shapes thought. And when you begin thinking in someone else's vocabulary, you have quietly moved inside their worldview. Stage 2. Pre-filtered opinion. This is more subtle. Before you voice something, an observation, a criticism, an enthusiasm, you run a quick internal check. What would they think of this? You're not asking the question out loud. You might not even notice you're asking it. But the filter is there, and over time, opinions that would fail that filter never make it to the surface. They dissolve before they form. Stage 3. Relational drift. You start spending less time with people who knew you before, not because you were told to, but because those people reflect an older version of you, a version that feels somehow less than what you're becoming. The friction of being around them is uncomfortable. They don't track the new references. They ask questions that feel pedestrian. Slowly, without announcement, your social world realigns. Stage 4. The pause. This is the stage I described at the beginning. Someone asks what you think about something, and there's a pause, longer than it should be, because you are genuinely searching for what you think, and you find that the first answers that surface sound borrowed. They sound like something you were told to think, rather than something you actually arrived at. That pause is the evidence. That pause is your brain trying to locate you in a place you've quietly vacated. The hardest truth about identity capture: you often can't feel it while it's happening, because the person doing it isn't always aware they're doing it. This isn't always predation. Sometimes it's just the gravitational effect of a very powerful personality on someone who needed, more than they admitted, to be seen. That's not your failure, but it is your responsibility to recognize the pull before it becomes the current. Let's talk about what this actually looks like in practice, not as a checklist, but as a sequence. These behaviors don't arrive randomly. They tend to arrive in order. Understanding the order is what lets you see the architecture. The opening move: you are the exception. It usually comes early. They've met a lot of people, navigated a lot of relationships, but you are different. You see things others don't. There's a quality in you that most people can't access. Feel the internal sensation carefully, because it's layered. On the surface, warmth, pride, the pleasure of being recognized. Underneath, a quiet, anxious pressure. If you are exceptional, you can also stop being exceptional. And that possibility of being ordinary in their eyes becomes something you start working against without realizing it. This move also does something structurally important. It subtly separates you from your support network. It positions their relationship with you as uniquely perceptive, which makes you less likely to trust the judgment of people who weren't chosen the way you were. Your friends don't fully get it. They haven't earned the same perspective. You file that thought away. The escalation. Attention as currency. By the second or third month, you have learned, unconsciously, what their full attention feels like, the specific quality of being the person they're most interested in a room. And you've also learned what it feels like when that attention moves away. The drop is real, measurable, akin to a mild withdrawal. And because you don't have a name for it, you assign it to other causes. You're tired, you're insecure. It's just a mood. You don't identify it as attention withdrawal, which means you can't defend against it. What you do instead is, unconsciously, begin to perform. You make yourself more interesting, more agreeable, more specifically what they respond to. You think you're just bringing your best self. You are actually being trained. The bond, weaponized vulnerability. This one is subtle because it often feels like the most genuine moment in the relationship. They share something real, a wound, a failure, something they don't tell many people. In that disclosure, you feel trusted. You feel chosen not just for your brilliance but for your steadiness. You open up in return. Things you carry quietly. The result is a feeling of profound mutual exposure. Equals. But notice what has happened. They now know your pressure points, your fears, the wounds that haven't fully healed. This information wasn't collected cynically, or maybe it was, or maybe the line between the two is genuinely hard to locate in human behavior. What matters is, it gets used. 6 months later, in a moment of conflict, they will somehow find exactly the words that land hardest. The exact insecurity that, once activated, makes you doubt your own perception of events. This isn't always deliberate, but it is consistent. And consistency has its own meaning. The control, reframing your perception as the problem. Something is off. You know it. You bring it up carefully, gently, because you've learned to be careful about how you raise things around them. What happens next is the diagnostic behavior. A healthy person will engage with your concern, even if imperfectly. A dangerous, charismatic person will redirect. Suddenly the conversation isn't about what you noticed. It's about your sensitivity, your tendency to misread things, your history, the very wounds you shared in the vulnerability stage, which have now been reframed as evidence that you can't be trusted to perceive reality accurately. You walk away from the conversation without resolving your original concern, carrying a new weight, the possibility that your perception itself is the problem. That experience is specific. It produces a particular kind of dizzy disorientation, like the floor has shifted slightly, and you're not sure how much to trust your own balance. Clinical language calls it gaslighting, but here's what makes it uniquely effective for a charismatic person. You've seen them be perceptive. You've watched them read situations with genuine accuracy. So when they turn that same apparent insight toward discrediting your experience, part of you believes them. They're rarely wrong. Maybe this is one of those times. The most sophisticated weapon, truth. This is the one that lingers longest after the relationship ends. Genuinely dangerous charismatic people are often genuinely perceptive. They do see real things. They can identify your patterns, name your blind spots, call out the thing you've been quietly avoiding, and they are right about it. Sometimes. The problem is that once someone has been right about you, you can't easily dismiss them when they use that same clarity as a weapon. When the insight comes packaged with cruelty, when the accurate observation is delivered in a way that diminishes, isolates, or humiliates, you don't know whether to trust your discomfort or dismiss it as defensiveness. Maybe this just stings because it's true. Maybe I'm reacting to the truth rather than how it was said. That confusion, that inability to simultaneously hold that this person is accurate and this person is hurting me, is exactly the territory they occupy. They need you to be unable to separate the insight from the relationship. Because if you could separate them, if you could take the true thing and leave the relationship, their leverage collapses. Here's what the aftermath actually feels like, and I'm going to say the part people don't say out loud. You miss them. You know something was wrong. Some part of you, the part that's been quietly collecting evidence for months, knows you were smaller in that relationship than you should have been. But the warmth was real. The moments of genuine expansion, those were real too. And missing those moments while knowing what they cost you feels like a betrayal of your own clarity. So you split into two. One part of you grieves. The other audits, going back through the timeline, trying to locate the exact moment it turned, trying to determine whether you invented the good parts or misread the bad ones. That loop is exhausting. It is also a diagnostic. Healthy relationships don't leave you auditing your own memory for months. The fact that you are is information. Then there's the shame layer. And this is the part nobody wants to name. You are ashamed that you wanted it so badly, that you rearranged yourself for it, that people around you tried to say something, and you defended this person hard. That smart, self-aware you, the version of yourself you most identify with, went under so quietly. That shame is understandable. It is also a trap, because the story isn't that you were foolish. The story is that you were human, with a human brain, encountering something human brains are specifically not equipped to resist in real time. The need to belong, to be seen, to have your specific self recognized and valued, that's not a weakness. That's what we are. And a charismatic person who has learned, consciously or otherwise, to appear to fulfill that need has access to something very close to a neurological master key. The shame you feel is the wrong target. The right response is to understand the mechanism. Not so you become armored against warmth, but so you become someone who doesn't need external validation badly enough to accept a counterfeit. Everything I'm about to say grows directly from the mechanics we've walked through. These aren't generic tips, they're specific countermeasures. Because intermittent reinforcement works through unpredictability. Track the pattern, not the moment. In the moment, a charismatic person can make almost anything feel fine. A single warm afternoon can reset weeks of unease. What you need to track is the trajectory over time. One question. Over the last 3 months, do you feel more like yourself around this person, or less? More confident in your own perception, or less? More connected to your external relationships, or less? The answers to those questions will tell you more than any single interaction. Single interactions are the unit of manipulation. Trajectories are much harder to fake. Because identity capture begins with borrowed vocabulary. Periodically take a language inventory. Sit down and write out, without filtering, what you actually think about something you've discussed with this person. Then look at what you wrote. How much of it sounds like you? How much sounds like it was absorbed? This isn't about purging influence. We all absorb from people we respect. It's about the ratio. If almost everything you think about certain topics has been pre-shaped by this person, that ratio tells you something. Because weaponized vulnerability requires you to have shared your wounds. Slow the disclosure. No rule says intimacy must be built fast. The urgency to disclose, the pressure of a bond forming rapidly, that urgency is worth examining. Real trust is built over time, and with consistency, not in a single raw conversation. You don't owe anyone your wounds on a timeline that serves them. Because the gaslighting move works by turning your perception into the problem. Keep an external record. Write things down close to when they happen, not elaborately. Just what I noticed, what was said, how I felt. A few sentences, dated. The reason this works is specific. Gaslighting operates through memory. It needs you to be uncertain about what actually happened. A written record, made before the reframe, is something they can't access. It gives you a reference point for your own experience that exists outside the dynamic. Because truth as weapon works by making you unable to separate insight from cruelty. Practice separating them. You are allowed to take the useful thing and reject the delivery. You are allowed to say, internally, that the observation might be accurate, and the way it was delivered was still not okay. Those two things can both be true. The test isn't whether the insight is real. The test is, does this person's way of delivering insight make you more capable and more yourself? Or does it make you smaller and more dependent on their interpretation of you? One is mentorship. The other is control. I want to say something clearly before we close. Most charismatic people aren't running a strategy. Most aren't consciously aware of the mechanics I've described. Many, and this is the complicating truth, are operating from wounds. The need to be the center of a room to pull people into orbit, to require loyalty as a condition of belonging. Those patterns often come from somewhere real and painful. That doesn't make the impact on you any less real. And it doesn't make you responsible for managing their patterns at the cost of your own selfhood. Here's the core insight I want you to carry. The danger of a charismatic person isn't in their character. It's in the gap that they need to work. The gap between you and your own perception. The gap between you and your external relationships. The gap between what you actually think and what you've learned to filter before thinking. Those gaps are what give them purchase. Close them, not through suspicion, not through coldness, but through the daily practice of knowing, at any given moment, what you actually think, feel, and want, before running it through anyone else's reaction, and the leverage disappears, not because they changed, because you stopped providing the necessary footing. The most powerful version of you isn't the guarded version. It's the grounded one. The one who can receive warmth without needing it so desperately that she reshapes herself to keep it. That person, she was there before. She's still there. She's the one who noticed the pause. Start with the pause. I want to leave you with one question. Not a theory. A question to sit with tonight or this week. Think about the person this video brought to mind. Ask yourself honestly. Around this person, am I more myself, or a carefully managed version of myself? Not more polished, not more considered, more of myself, more trusting of my own instincts, more willing to voice what I actually think, more connected to the people who knew me before. If the answer is yes, that's worth protecting. If the answer is no, that recognition is the beginning of something, not the ending. Drop a comment below. I read everything, especially on videos like this. If this found you at the right time, share it. Someone in your life is probably in this right now, looking for a language to name what's happening to them. Subscribe if you want to keep going deeper. New video every week. I'll see you there.